The sky above us has become a graveyard. In the last 6 months alone, 5 catastrophic incidents have claimed 31 lives, destroyed families, and exposed a pattern that should terrify anyone who has ever trusted their life to an aircraft. This isn't about bad luck or isolated tragedies scattered across the statistical landscape of aviation. This is about a systematic failure that has been hiding in plain sight, camouflaged by the sheer volume of flights and protected by an industry desperate to maintain public confidence. What you're about to discover will fundamentally alter your understanding of aviation safety in America. The numbers tell a story the industry doesn't want you to hear. While commercial airlines celebrate years without fatal incidents and manufacturers tout enhanced safety features, there exists a shadow world of aviation where the margin for error has shrunk to almost nothing. In just 180 days, 5 separate crashes have devastated communities across America. The wreckage fell on military housing in San Diego. It plunged into the Pacific Ocean. It scattered across Ohio backyards. It littered California farmland. It rained down from Arizona skies in a mid-air collision so violent that 2 aircraft were obliterated instantly. What connects these tragedies isn't immediately obvious. The locations vary, the circumstances differ, the victims came from different walks of life. But dig deeper into the investigation reports, examine the aircraft registration numbers, study the makes and models involved, and a pattern emerges that is as undeniable as it is disturbing. One manufacturer's name appears in every single incident, one brand that has been synonymous with general aviation for decades. One company whose products have been trusted by flight schools, charter operations, and private owners for generations. The revelation isn't that their aircraft are flying, it's that in these 6 months their aircraft have been falling from the sky with alarming regularity. These aren't ancient relics held together with hope and duct tape. Some represent models still in production, still being marketed as safe and reliable transportation. The people flying them weren't reckless thrill seekers. They were experienced pilots, families on vacation, professionals conducting legitimate business, individuals who had every reason to believe they would reach their destinations alive. The investigations have revealed a web of contributing factors that extend far beyond pilot error or bad weather, pointing to systemic issues in how these aircraft are designed, certified, maintained, and operated. The media has been surprisingly quiet about the pattern. Individual crashes get coverage. Local news dispatches helicopters, interviews neighbors, speaks with investigators. But the connecting thread, the deeper story about what these incidents collectively represent, has largely gone unexplored. Perhaps because the crashes occurred in different states under different circumstances. Perhaps because the aviation industry wields considerable influence over how these stories are framed. Perhaps because our modern news cycle has little appetite for the painstaking investigative work required to connect dots across months and miles. The result is the same. A pattern of failures that should have triggered widespread alarm has been treated as unrelated, unfortunate accidents. But the families of the victims know better. They've found each other through grief support groups and online forums, comparing notes on what investigators have told them, sharing frustration about the pace of inquiries, and increasingly asking why all of their loved ones died in aircraft bearing the same manufacturer's nameplate. They've begun hiring their own aviation experts, organizing, lobbying, demanding that regulators take action before more people die. Their determination has created a groundswell of concern within aviation circles, where pilots, mechanics, and safety experts are having increasingly uncomfortable conversations about whether the industry has been too complacent, too confident, too willing to assume that decades of relatively safe operations mean these aircraft will remain safe indefinitely. Each of the 31 people who died had a story. They had families who loved them, careers they were building, dreams they were pursuing. They weren't statistics in some actuarial table. They were human beings who trusted a particular technology, a particular brand, a particular aircraft type with their most precious possession, their life. That trust was betrayed by an accumulation of vulnerabilities, design compromises, maintenance challenges, training deficiencies, and regulatory gaps that, when combined in just the wrong way, transformed routine flights into death sentences. Over the following accounts, you will encounter the detailed circumstances of 5 crashes that occurred between late May and late August of this year. You will learn about the specific incidents, the people involved, the immediate causes as understood by investigators, and the broader questions each crash raises. But more importantly, you will see the common thread that ties these tragedies together. A thread that reveals uncomfortable truths about an aircraft manufacturer whose products have dominated general aviation for decades and whose safety record is now under the most intense scrutiny it has faced in recent memory. The name of this manufacturer will become apparent as you read, but understanding why their aircraft keep appearing in accident reports requires grappling with complex questions about engineering trade-offs, economic pressures, regulatory philosophy, and the inherent challenges of aviation safety. This is a factual account of what has happened in American skies over 6 horrifying months, compiled from official investigation reports, eyewitness accounts, and expert analysis. The goal isn't to frighten people away from flying or demonize an industry. The goal is to shine a light on a pattern that has emerged from the shadows, to demand accountability and answers, and to ensure that the deaths of these 31 individuals serve as a catalyst for meaningful change rather than becoming forgotten footnotes in aviation history. What follows demands your careful consideration. The lives that were lost deserve nothing less than the truth, however uncomfortable that truth may be. 99.5% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. Be the 0.5% that keeps real aviation alive and helps me bring you even better content. Hit that red button now. 5. Mid-air collision over Arizona, August 31st, 2025. On a clear Arizona day, when visibility stretched for miles and the sky should have been one of the safest places imaginable, 2 aircraft occupied the same piece of airspace at the same moment with catastrophic results. A Cessna 172M, one of the most ubiquitous training aircraft in the world, collided in mid-air with an extra EA-300L aerobatic aircraft. The violence of the impact destroyed both planes instantly, scattering debris across the desert landscape below and killing everyone aboard in a fraction of a second. The Cessna 172, known affectionately in pilot circles as the Skyhawk, represents the backbone of flight training operations across America and around the world. Thousands of these aircraft take to the skies every day, carrying student pilots on their first solo flights, instrument students practicing approaches, and experienced aviators using them for cross-country trips. The reliability and forgiving flight characteristics of the 172 have made it the default choice for flight schools for generations. Yet on this August day, those qualities couldn't save the aircraft or its occupants from the fundamental physics of 2 objects converging at high speed. The investigation into this collision focuses on several critical questions. Were both pilots operating under visual flight rules, responsible for seeing and avoiding other aircraft? Was either aircraft in communication with air traffic control? What were the flight paths that led these 2 planes to the same point in space at the same time? But beyond these immediate investigative questions lies a more troubling reality. The Cessna 172M involved in this crash is part of a family of aircraft that appears in 4 of the 5 deadliest crashes over these 6 months, a pattern that cannot be dismissed as mere coincidence. 4. Los Banos, California field crash, August 2025. The haunting image of an aircraft circling for hours before finally succumbing to whatever mechanical or pilot emergency gripped it captures something uniquely terrifying about aviation disasters. In August 2025, a single-engine Cessna 172 flew in increasingly erratic patterns over California's Central Valley agricultural region near Los Banos. The pilot apparently struggling with some crisis that prevented normal landing while also keeping the aircraft aloft long enough to create an aerial ballet of desperation visible to anyone watching from the ground. Witnesses reported seeing the plane circle repeatedly, flying patterns that suggested someone at the controls, fighting to maintain command of an aircraft that no longer wanted to obey. Eventually, inevitably, the Cessna descended into a field, the impact killing the lone pilot instantly. The National Transportation Safety Board's investigation continues, focusing on recovered flight data, maintenance records, and communications between the pilot and air traffic controllers to understand what went so catastrophically wrong. What makes this incident particularly relevant to our larger pattern is both the aircraft type, once again a Cessna 172, the same basic model involved in the Arizona mid-air collision, and the nature of the emergency, which appears to have involved some form of controllability issue that trapped the pilot in a nightmarish situation where crashing was inevitable but could be temporarily delayed. The fact that this pilot circled for hours suggests someone desperately trying every technique, every procedure, every possible solution to a problem that ultimately proved insurmountable. This wasn't a sudden catastrophic failure, but rather a slow-motion disaster that the pilot saw coming and couldn't prevent, a particularly cruel form of aviation emergency that raises questions about whether these aircraft provide pilots with adequate options when critical systems fail. 3. Howland Township, Ohio wooded crash, June 29, 2025. When families board an aircraft for vacation, they do so with the reasonable expectation that the most dangerous part of their journey will be the drive to the airport. On June 29, 2025, a family embarking on what should have been a joyful vacation instead perished in a heavily wooded area near Howland Township, Ohio, when their chartered Cessna 441 crashed shortly after takeoff from the regional airport. The twin-engine turboprop Cessna 441, marketed as a step-up in performance and capability from smaller single-engine models, represented exactly the kind of aircraft families trust when they want more safety margin than a small plane can provide. 6 people died in this crash, 2 crew members performing their professional duties, and 4 passengers whose only crime was wanting to create happy memories with their loved ones. The terrain where the aircraft came to rest complicated recovery and investigation efforts, the wreckage scattered through dense forest that made accessing the site extraordinarily difficult for first responders and accident investigators. Preliminary findings suggest the aircraft experienced difficulties almost immediately after becoming airborne, never achieving the altitude or performance necessary for normal flight. The Cessna 441, while a larger and more complex aircraft than the 172 models involved in other crashes on this list, shares the same manufacturer's design philosophy, engineering culture, and approach to aircraft construction. When mechanical systems fail on any aircraft, the results are often tragic, but when they fail immediately after takeoff, the phase of flight where options are most limited, where altitude is minimal, and where the possibility of safely returning to the runway disappears in seconds, the outcome is almost always catastrophic. This crash reinforces the pattern. Cessna aircraft of various types and capabilities have been involved in incident after incident during this 6-month window, suggesting potential systemic issues that transcend any single model or design. 2. Pacific Ocean crash, off San Diego, June 8, 2025. The ocean is unforgiving of aviation failures, swallowing evidence, complicating rescue efforts, and turning what might have been survivable crashes on land into death sentences for everyone aboard. On June 8, 2025, a twin-engine Cessna 414 departed from a San Diego area airport carrying 6 people who believed they were embarking on a routine flight. Within minutes, something went catastrophically wrong. The pilot's increasingly desperate radio transmissions to air traffic controllers told the story of an emergency spiraling out of control, problems with aircraft controllability, systems not responding as they should, the aircraft refusing to obey the pilot's commands. The Mayday calls, preserved in recordings that investigators would later analyze in heartbreaking detail, captured a professional aviator recognizing that disaster was imminent and trying everything possible to prevent it. The Cessna 414 hit the Pacific Ocean with enough force to kill all 6 occupants, the wreckage sinking into waters that would challenge recovery efforts and delay investigation findings. Weather conditions at the time included low ceilings and reduced visibility, factors that complicate any flight but shouldn't be insurmountable for properly functioning aircraft flown by qualified pilots. The fact that this crew found themselves fighting a losing battle with their airplane under conditions that should have been manageable raises critical questions. Was there a mechanical failure that robbed the pilots of control? Was there a design characteristic of the Cessna 414 that makes it particularly vulnerable under certain meteorological conditions? Were maintenance issues lurking in this aircraft's history that contributed to the disaster? The investigation continues, but what cannot be disputed is that once again, the name Cessna appears in the accident report of a crash that claimed multiple lives during this catastrophic 6-month period. 1. San Diego residential crash, May 22, 2025. The deadliest single incident in this 6-month catalogue of aviation horror occurred on May 22, 2025, when a Cessna Citation II business jet, representing the upper end of Cessna's product line, a sophisticated twin-engine jet aircraft designed for corporate and charter operations, fell from the sky onto a military housing neighborhood in San Diego. The aircraft struck power lines during what appears to have been an approach gone disastrously wrong, plummeting into a residential area where military families lived their daily lives, completely unaware that death was about to rain down from above. All 6 people aboard the Citation were killed instantly in the impact and post-crash fire. On the ground, 8 people suffered injuries, some serious, as the aircraft's wreckage and the resulting conflagration consumed a house, damaged multiple vehicles, and turned a quiet residential street into a scene of devastation. Investigators examining the wreckage and reviewing flight data have focused on environmental factors, including fog and reduced visibility, that may have contributed to the crew's difficulty in safely approaching the airport. But environmental factors, while certainly relevant, don't explain why this particular aircraft, flown by what preliminary reports suggest were qualified professional pilots, ended up catastrophically low, striking obstacles, and crashing into a populated area. The Cessna Citation II, while substantially different in size, performance, and sophistication from the single-engine Cessna 172s and twin-engine piston Cessnas involved in other crashes on this list, nevertheless bears the same manufacturer's name and reflects the same corporate culture, the same engineering philosophy, and the same approach to aircraft design and certification. That a business jet carrying passengers who likely paid substantial sums for what they believed was safe professional transportation, could crash into a residential neighborhood, killing everyone aboard and injuring innocents on the ground, represents perhaps the most visible and horrifying example of how these failures are affecting not just those who choose to fly, but also those who happen to be in the wrong place when aircraft fall from the sky. The pattern is undeniable. 5 crashes. 5 Cessna aircraft of varying types and capabilities, 31 lives lost, multiple investigations ongoing, and a growing body of evidence that suggests the world's most prolific general aviation manufacturer may be facing a crisis of safety, design, or oversight that demands immediate attention and action. Whether these incidents represent design flaws that have always existed but are only now manifesting in catastrophic ways, maintenance challenges specific to aging Cessna fleets, pilot training deficiencies related to how these aircraft handle emergencies, or regulatory gaps that have allowed unsafe aircraft to continue flying, the conclusion remains the same. Something is very wrong, And until we understand what and why, every person who climbs aboard a Cessna aircraft is potentially at risk. The families of the victims deserve answers. The flying public deserves transparency, and the aviation industry, including Cessna and its parent company Textron Aviation, owes everyone an honest accounting of what has gone wrong and what will be done to ensure these 6 months of tragedy don't become a permanent new reality for general aviation safety.